Hi, everyone. Welcome to True Disabled Story. My name is Nico, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm a white man with parted blonde hair, large blue and brown spectacles, and a bright green t-shirt underneath an unzipped zip-up golden hoodie with the sleeves up. I'm seated against a green wall, and in the back is my kitchen. Like roughly 25% of Americans, 17% of Philadelphians, and about 20% of the global population, I'm disabled. And whether we look locally, nationally, or globally, disabled communities are full of dynamic, diverse, and frankly delightful people with their own stories to tell. All we have to do is listen. Now, as many of you know, I was born with my disability. I've never known differently. But in my travels and adventures in the disability community, I've come to know a lot of friends of mine who have different disability stories, and I'm eager to hear their perspectives. Today, I'm joined by my friend Neil, who comes to us from one of his farms. So I'm really eager to hear Neil's tale and to see how he is. Hi, Neil. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nico.
Of course. So, Neil, what was your path to diagnosis like? Was this a surprise or was it something you were actively pursuing? Tell this story for us.
So I'm multiply disabled, and that can be the medical model or the social model, whichever one you choose.
Yeah.
Do you need me to explain what I mean by that, or should I just?
I would love it if you could explain. Sure.
So in the medical model, I have developmental disabilities. I have complex trauma from sex abuse, so it's psychological traumas. And then I also have, in early adulthood, spinal cord injuries. So I have a series of terrible catastrophic injuries at work and a car accident. So the multiple ways that I'm disabled medically have to do with my autism diagnosis and the sex abuse, and then also the physical damage that happened to me at work and at the car accident. So those are multiple ways that things have happened to me to create deficits or differences. And those medical terms I don't myself subscribe to, because I don't have weaknesses and I don't have deficits, I have differences. And those can come from trauma, or they can come from just the way I'm wired, like when I was born with autism. And the reason I also don't subscribe to the medical model is because of it failing to actually ameliorate or make better or restore my health. That my health is restored in community. It's not restored with medication or trying to make me more normal, but being with people that will accept my differences and support my needs. And then also, as Nico always does, and why I always like talking to him, is he focuses on my strength and he encourages me to stay strong. So the medical model has no value to me. I have to use it when I'm talking to the Social Security, disability people, or voc rehab, or employers. They always want to know about my medical conditions. But what I want to tell them about is the social model, which is I'm multiply disabled by your stereotypes. I'm multiply disabled by the economic injustice of being married on Social Security disability and being forced to report all my income and having taken 50% of my income as a Medicaid spend down. That's a tax that disables me economically because I'm receiving insurance payments that everyone buys into, which is Social Security disability insurance, but because of conservative politics, that turned it into Social Security disability income, and they count it against you when you need your life insurance or your health insurance. So there are multiple ways we're disabled in society. There is no way to get disabled by a doctor. The doctors don't disable us. Therefore, the medical model doesn't have value to me. But absolutely, society will disable when it serves their needs. And right now, what I'm feeling is, I'm late in life realizing, oh, this whole system is designed to make sure that I don't have power. I don't have financial power. I don't have political power. And so that's why I'm on this call with you, Nico, is because this story is not, it's a universal story. Even if you're not disabled, ableism is disabling you. Even if you're not having physical or mental impairments, the fact that you have stereotypes running through your head is a disabling condition for you. That we are all disabled socially when we are divided in our beliefs about what a person is and what constitutes a real person. And it's been awful in the last 10 years to see how my deficits, medical deficits, have been used against me in the realm of politics. And when we have presidents calling out people with the same injuries that I have and the same developmental issues that I have, and using slurs and stereotypes to dehumanize people like me, I know that I am also being disabled by the current president or whoever is in power at the time. So my disabled story is a social model of disability. I don't think that the medical model will ever help me feel less disabled. I do know that if people could start seeing me as human with needs and they're valid, and that I'm not a wart or a drain or a lesion or a boil or a blister or any other kind of deficit to society, then perhaps one day there will be true justice, and that we will see that everybody's differences are our strengths. Our collective strength is by acknowledging and supporting our differences.
Thank you, Neil. You put that really succinctly, and I love how you mentioned that disability is part of diversity, that disability is a necessary part of the human experience. For indeed, what is more human than our relationship with our own bodies? You get into the social model of disability, and before you and I began recording, we were also discussing a different way that the social model disables you. The fact that because you can't go through the state's process to get this right or that benefit, you're deemed somehow ineligible. And the accommodations that you could use to access benefits, which again are rightfully yours, are not given to you. So I
Correct.
wanted to point that out. I'm sorry about that, friend. With this second question, I want to give you a wider canvas to paint that picture. You talk about your disabilities, your diagnoses, and you talk about how long it's taken you to like even claw back some crumb of dignity and worth from this unnecessarily punitive benefits system. What impact does this have on your life? What impact do you see, like socially or at home, um, legally, professionally? You can take this any way you really want.
Can I rephrase that so I know we're talking about the same thing?
Of course.
What is ableism and its pernicious ability to dehumanize me? How does that affect me internally and also with my family, and then externally in the outside world?
Yeah, that's true. How does it affect you in community?
Yeah, so a lot of times, I mean, just talk. I have chronic diseases from my trauma, so I have autoimmunity and I have a neurological. I don't want to give you the names of it because I think again we're not. I'm trying to get away from stereotypes. But when you have the life that I've lived, which means I've weathered through a lot of difficulty, and you ask me how did I claw back some dignity in that terrible life that I've lived? Well, to me, it's been a silly waste of time to be in doctor's offices. And I know you know how this feels, Nico, is that you've lived with your condition your whole life, and then you walk into a doctor's office, and it just feels like a comedy that they're somehow the authority on your body, that somehow they know exactly what is going to be best for you. And so, um, one way that I absolutely need, especially medical professionals, but also anyone with power in the outside world, those people that have power over me, they need to collaborate with me, and I request that immediately. And that doesn't work. That you can quickly see who's the authoritarian in the room when they will not share power and they won't value your lived experience. Lived hyphen experience. It's not past tense. It's what's in. That's a compound word with a hyphen because it's an asset. It's what we have right now. We have lived experience. So we haven't lived the experience, and it's not in the distant past. It's what has made us who we are. And if doctors cannot take our lived experience and from that build a therapeutic model that will work with what we know about our bodies, then anything they give us has no value to us. Therefore, they've lost their power. And that happens in families too, because as a parent, the stereotypes, people like me don't have value. earn a living. We're not creating, we're not breadwinning, right? So I've spent most of my adult life raising children and caring for dying family members in hospice situations. So it's kind of, I think of myself as a house elf, and no one gave me a sock. But Dobie has more power than any of the wizards, but they hold him down with that stupid sock thing. Because he not because they actually have power over him, but he believes the lie that the wizard is better than him. And that's internal ableism. And your whole family can have internal ableism. Your whole family can support the belief that you're not really that capable, even though you're the one doing all of the medical work for your own recovery, which is a medical degree in itself, to just manage your body, that all of its medical needs. You end up with I think anyone that's lived a life like yours, Nico, or mine, with chronic disease needs to be given an honorary medical degree. And fine, make me take the boards, but just make sure the tests are about the stuff that I've lived through. So, so this type of clawing back, I'm not asking for a sock, for one thing. I'm not clawing anything. I'm just standing in my truth. And then I'm finding people who will listen to me. And it's funny, as a 54-year-old, these truths have been in me this whole time, but it wasn't until the pandemic that people actually wanted to know what I was talking about. The pandemic, the shared trauma of everyone isolated, living disabled lives together, was the first time I felt like, oh, you've all come down to my house help level. You all left the banquet hall, you went down to the kitchen where the food's made, and you're realizing these guys are really valuable. We should learn from them. And that happened for, I don't know, you remember this part. Like, there were dolphins in the Venice canals, the world was cleaning up, everyone was staying at home, and disabled people were having a moment because we had lived this isolation for our whole lives. And then all of a sudden, everyone's like, how do you do this? How do you be a marginalized person? We're all being marginalized. So the idea that we have to claw anything is also a stereotype. There's nothing to take back. The power is already there. What we have to do is drop. I don't even think we need to even drop the ball of stereotypes and ableism. We just need to set it down and just walk away.
Love that. I love that you're getting at the fundamental fact that disabled rights are human rights, and that so much of what separates disabled people from the rest of society is completely unnecessary. It's weird because as you were talking about the pandemic, I was reminded, and not in a good way, unfortunately, as you say, how in that first pandemic summer, suddenly everybody figured out how to work from home, socialize from home, and found this kind of fusion of community based and home based solutions. And then the very second it became somehow inconvenient for capitalism, it was as if we could no longer sustain those practices. When in fact we can, right? We could have been including disabled people from the start, from the word go, and we just decided not to raise that extra finger or make that extra bit of effort. And that's
Or wear the mask for people like me who are immunocompromised.
yeah,
I'm likely to die of COVID even today. I have scarring in my lungs from all the years of immobility, from full paralysis. I've had so many cases of pneumonia. I have a clotting disorder from the medications. If I had ever contracted that first strain of COVID, I was going to bleed out before I ever got to the hospital.
that's
And
very
I had a brother saying, he literally said, oh, it's just going to affect that low-lying section of humanity. It's just going to clean up society. And I was it was a family call, and I said, well, I happen to be part of that section of humanity.
that's a very chilling thing to say.
So that is not clawing anything back. That's just standing in my truth. Like, having the language, which is what you're building, Nico. You're building ways for people to start thinking about what it is that they are and how they identify on all those different intersectional spaces. But especially, it's so difficult to get people to think about how they may or may not ever become or are already disabled because it's such a terrible place to be in, just like a house elf in Harry Potter. It is not something you ever want to be because of the way you see them being treated. And then there are some disabilities, even inside of disability, there are some disabilities that are better than others, that are socially better to have this kind of injury than this kind of injury, or this kind of condition and that one, or this disease process. And to not think about that critically and to be disabled means that you're likely to be much like the second wave of feminism or some of the militant civil rights Black leaders who were so bigoted about their own types of people that they were never able to produce the kind of groundswell that we need to stop ableism, just like we still haven't stopped sexism and we're still dealing with racism. These are fundamental human rights, and the principles that destroy them are stereotype, and especially stereotypes that dehumanize. And if we believe those truths, then we become the enslaved, or we become the objectified, or we become the invalids, literally not valid humans. Absolutely, I will change that to invalid because I parked my car in the wrong fucking garage. Sorry for the language.
That's
I
okay.
need a new garage. I don't need a new car. And I know how to pay my bills. But this current system doesn't give me the resources. And then it blames me for not paying it, for not validating my spot in the planet. So the tax that I was talking about before the phone call is that as a disabled person, especially autistic, 85% of college educated autistics like me with severe difference cannot work in a normal work environment because our needs for lower stimulation are not honored. For example, I need to be outside. How many office jobs are going to give me that option? So I not only is the world not designed for me, but if I want to work, then I have to design my own companies. I have to find my own team. I have to pay my own taxes. I have to know accounting. It's a good thing I'm autistic because that's another thing about us is we're not only 85% unemployed, but we're 140% faster and better than the rest of the people. And we are experts at multiple categories because of the over enervated nervous system that bosses can't tolerate. Well, so you can't tolerate my emotional overwhelm, but you can tolerate all my inventions and problem solving and cost saving measures that I've implemented. I can literally run out of fingers to tell you how many times I've been in a job long enough for them to extract my intelligence and then get tired of my overstimulation that they caused. So those are the things just specifically to that one type of disability, which is a developmental disability, knowing the language and asking for those reasonable accommodations so that you don't have to create your own world. That's where I would like us to move into in this. I want a Me Too movement about disability where we were like, boss, guess what? I just saw that you were overstimulated. Now just times that by 20. Can we turn the lights down?
Uh-huh.
You put on sunglasses outside. I need them on the inside. When we're indoors, you're overstimulating me, just like you go golfing with your sunglasses. And right now, we can't have that conversation. We're told that we're activists, that we're over emotional. No, it's not anything to do with. Yes, I have emotional overwhelm, but that's only after your workplace has been hostile to me. And we're not even talking about the stereotypes. That's just the environmental impact of workplaces that are not accessible to me as an autistic person. And we can go on and on about all the different permutations, so many different ways that a workplace could work with the disabled rather than make them the problem and then harass them out of their jobs.
That's very fair to say. Thank you, Neil. I really appreciate this blunt honesty. It's not fair how disabled people are treated in the US or globally. You mentioned something as you were talking earlier that you're just now standing in your own truth, in your own power as a disabled person. And here you are at 54. If you could go back in time somehow and give advice to your younger self, or even advise a younger autistic person in roughly the same situation as you, what advice would you give?
This is something that my friend Nico taught me about history, that the women's suffragette movement, we can say that it started during the Civil War. We can say that they ramped up by the turn of the century, and then by the 20s, things actually started hitting where we had women in power being elected and voting. We can say the same thing about the race relations between blacks and whites, specifically those that came out of slavery in the South and the whites that were oppressing them into the 50s, that was also going on. And it took longer than the women's suffragette movement. So a shorthand is to say it takes about 50 years for a movement to make a milestone, and the women's rights and voting, and then the civil rights and integration from segregation, that these are movements that are still in process, and their lags are about 50 years. And then we have the ADA, which falls short of what we actually need, but it is a milestone towards a movement that at least makes, it's like I always say, at least I get good parking, right? At least I have my handicap or my, I won't say what I actually call it, but that parking place is a visible manifestation of the ADA, that society now sees, that at least they see that there is something called disability. And there are so many different things that have happened since the ADA to promote and also to take away from the rights of the disabled, just like so much has happened since the 50s to both promote and take away from the rights of brown and black people and Pacific Islanders, Asians. There's a lot of different ways that race plays and still plays and needs work. And we're still seeing it with gender equality and all the things happening. So if I went back in time with a time machine, I would take myself, I'd put my old self in a box and maybe have a handgun or something so I could put myself out of my misery. I'd put my young self in the time machine, and then I'd move that time machine needle to sometime 100 years from now, because then I might have hope that my young self would be seen as valuable. But I know today, even today as a youth, I was first neurologically tested as a 9-year-old, and I was told I was a super intelligent kid that needed a quiet place to work. And my family and my school system could not see my strengths because of my obviously bad behavior from the felony crimes that were being committed against me. So I had this crazy childhood of high intelligence and capability being washed over by this pedophilia, the thing that everyone's afraid of now, of being groomed and then being exploited. That's me. Hi, this is me. I'm over here. That actually happened to me. And I cannot see any decade since the 1970s when this was all happening, not the 1980s, the 90s, the turn of the century, the 20s. There still isn't a safe place for children that are like me. And so I would need that time machine to take me forward in time to a place where I would be safe. And if you ask me what my purpose is and what truth I'm standing in, I've always stood in my truth, but now I'm laser focused on the idea that there will be a place in history for a person like me in the future where they're safe from being exploited through stereotypes, through objectification, and that terrible truth that our judicial system favors the abuser. We will have a time and place where the justice that is built into the Constitution will actually be manifested in the court systems when people like me stand in our truth and tell our stories. And guess what we're doing today?
Exactly
Just
that.
that. What's the name of this podcast?
Indeed, it is True Disabled Story. Neil, that was a very good answer. I'd never had someone think so critically and so comprehensively about that answer. I really appreciate it. As you tied together ableism necessarily with sexism and racism, I'm reminded of the bigotry, right, faced by disabled immigrants at Ellis Island or Angel Island on the Pacific coast, where people were marked with chalk like C if they thought they had a cripple condition, just very brutally, like E for eyes, something wrong with their eyes or a vision disorder. In that way, disabled people, as you mentioned, were kind of defined as that lower half of life, or the riffraff, as one of your family members, I think, put it. It's a long and sad history of being lumped in with every other multi-marginalized identity. I see you in that. Neil, as we close our time together, I want to thank you for your time and your honesty again. I want to give you a space to talk about any wins you have, anything that you want to promote, any final wisdom you want to share. As disabled people, we so rarely get a chance to talk about what's going right in our lives or talk about anything we're positively bringing about. What momentum are you creating? Here's your chance to brag about yourself. Let's hear it.
It's not easy to start a company. I would much prefer to work at a place and get a paycheck, but that has never worked out for me.
Yeah.
So the state of Virginia's been this amazing. I've been in voc rehab at 3 different states: Utah, California, and now Virginia. And they finally got me into customized employment. And the first thing my advisor said is, brains like yours do not work well with status. You will say the truth to the top guy, he'll get offended and get rid of you. I'm like, oh, so you're telling me that's a good thing? He's like, yeah, that means that you don't need a job. You need to make your own place in the world. And now the state of Virginia's voc rehab is actually helping me start a business. And it's called customized employment. So what you're seeing is a huge, huge win in the voc rehab world. I'm very happy with the state of Virginia right now.
That's fantastic. I love seeing disabled self-sufficiency. Disability and capability do coexist. Neil, thank you so much. Wherever you go, whatever you do, I'm rooting for you, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you, Nico.
Thank you.